Namaste. Welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Surrender Yoga and Nancy. And instead of answering another question in the jar, would like to continue trying to answer a question that I never quite got answered in the last 2 days. I've been trying to answer it. It is a question I pulled out yesterday or the day before. And the question was, can you explain what Redeemer and Shamer ego are? Redeemer and Shamer ego are. And I attempted a couple of times, and because of interruptions, and because I just didn't give the answer that I wanted, I'm cheating, and I would like to go back to this and answer it. I'm still going to set my timer, and I'm going to try to answer it in 10 minutes, 10 seconds. That would be a real quick answer, much to your delight, I'm sure, but here we go. I'm going to answer that question. What is Shamer and Redeemer ego? Now, I've come up with these ideas of Shamer and Redeemer ego, and I'm sure other people have as well, but about 10 years ago, when I kind of realized that ego had this twin-like tendency to it, these two sides of the same coin, in regards to what it does to us. Now, ego, of course, is basically our psyche, this idea of who we think we are, this little meanness that we identify as, is not necessarily who we are. It's more of our personality and our personality tendency than it is who we truly are. So ego, that's a good name for it. Ego often creates what I call the filter veil, or the veil filter between as experiencing life and the reality of life and who we truly are, and the outer world. So it's like a veil in between that. What we take into our sensory input often has to pass through this ego veil layer or filter layer. And if it is unpleasant, if we deem it as unpleasant and something we do not want to experience it, we may have a tendency to want to avoid experiencing this, whatever life gives us at a conscious level. So we think we're pushing it away, and all we're doing is pulling it in and keeping it in. And it gets tangled up in this filter veil, or veil filter of ego, and it becomes a part of our personality, a part of who we are. So that filter layer, that veil layer between us experiencing who we truly are and what the world gives us, is ego. It's our personality. It's who we think we are. As I think it was referred to as the psyche, the sum total of all our learned events that we've stored inside. If it was pleasant, the thing that comes in through our sensory input was pleasant, we still cling to it, probably more in an obvious way, by pulling it in and wanting to experience something similar again. So our whole life energy is spent on trying to appease this ego, give it what it thinks it needs in order to feel safe and comfortable and peaceful inside. Of course, we now know from anything we've listened to in the last little while, that what I said, or what people who are much more involved than I am said, is that our ego is in the way. It is something we really need to dismantle to some degree. We need to realize that focusing all our attention on it and its dramas is what keeps us suffering, keeps us from finding the peace that we are so able to experience, the Shakti flow, the river of joy, as Yogananda called it, that flows within all of us. We are not noticing it or experiencing that river of joy because we're so busy focusing on ego's little antics. Now, that being said, this ego can be, like I said, have two sides to it. It could be a coin with two sides. On one side, I believe we have something called Shamer ego, and on the other side, we have something we can call Redeemer ego. And just like that, just as the names imply, Shamer shames, Redeemer redeems. So we have this personality that wants to keep us focused on it rather than the river of joy that is behind it, which is who we truly are. So what happens is it has a tendency to do two things. It shames us. It keeps us in shame, wallowing in shame. Or it redeems us. It pulls us away from shame into a false sense of confidence or arrogance or vanity. Now, the ego is a copulation of all our learned events, right? All our learned experiences that we've stuffed and stored inside. So it's also a compilation of all the voices we've heard through our conditioning over the years. Parents' voices that shamed us, parents' voices that redeemed us, wanting us to be more than the neighbors, for example. School teachers' voices that shamed us, school teachers' voices that redeemed us. Religious figures that we had relationships with that shamed us, and those that redeemed us. Society as a whole that shamed us by giving us a certain set of expectations that it conditioned us to believe we needed to adhere to. And if we didn't, we felt shame. If we did, we felt redeemed, but then we had to be better than anybody else. So we have all these, when we talk about the conditioning that makes our personality and gives us our core beliefs by which we operate and see the world through, which is this filter veil of samskaras and filter veil of little me and filter veil of psyche that we see through. When we are looking through that, we're experiencing life through that. So we're seeing things a certain way, and we're therefore going to react and respond a certain way to what we see and experience, what is brought into the sensory input. So when I say I have these voices or this conditioning inside me, I may encounter something that triggers this filter layer, triggers these samskaras, triggers that stuff stored, emotionally charged energy, memory that I've stuffed and stored inside, say, from my childhood. If I had a teacher, for example, that in grade 2 told me, in maybe not so many words, but left me with the perception that from something that she or he did, that I was never going to be as smart as the people in my class. And I owned that, pulled it in and owned it and stuffed it and stored it because it was too painful to deal with. Every time I encounter somebody years later, whatever, decades later, that somehow tell me that I'm stupid or trigger that sense of me that believes that I have this deficiency in intellect inside me, I'm going to react. That samskara is going to emerge. It's going to come up and it's going to try to get out of me, but because it is so painful, I will usually have the tendency to push it back down. When I talk about shamer and redeemer ego, this is where they come in. Shamer ego is going to continue shaming me. I'm encountering a situation where I have to use my intellect and I'm feeling this doubt. It automatically emerges. Shamer ego is going to pop in and I'm going to hear the voice of that teacher again, and it's going to say things to me like, oh my gosh, you're never going to be able to do this. You'll never be able to figure this out. You just shouldn't even try. You should give up. And I will feel that shamer ego emerging, trying to bring me down back into the shame, which I identify as part of my personality. Right? Shame over not being smart enough. What also may happen is the opposite side of that coin. After so much time, Redeemer may say, okay, let's not be less than others. Let's be more than others. So ego may pop in again, and then maybe voices pulling up, oh no, you can do better than that. You're smarter than her. You're smarter than them. Do this, do that. Show them that you're smarter than them. I'm trying to appease that social expectation with my redeemer ego, whereas shamer ego was telling me I couldn't appease it, so I might as well give up. Redeemer ego is going to tell me to appease it and to do more than, be more than others in my immediate surrounding so that I redeem it. And then I will get this false sense of arrogance, of vanity, that this is who I am. I am this person who's smarter than, I am this person who's better than, I'm in this person whatever, so that I am pulled up away from shame and in the pseudo glory, because it is very false and not a easy to maintain state of redeemer ego. I am feeling redemption from my shame. But as soon as I'm in, like say if I'm floating around in this ego layer being better than, and someone points out something about that me that is imperfect at that level, Maybe that, oh no, look at you, made this mistake, that proves to me that you're not as smart as you think you are. Then automatically I'm going to hear shame or ego coming into play to pull me back down into the muck and mirror of shame. So I'm going to be going back and forth with this ego between shaming, conditioning, and redeeming, conditioning, trying to, giving up because I'm less than, doing more because I'm supposed to be more than, and it's just a struggle between the two egos. The ego twins, I call them. One always wanting to shame, one always wanting to redeem, but with the sole purpose of keeping me focused on their antics so that I'm so distracted on what shamer ego is doing and redeemer ego is doing that I do not see this river of abundant joy behind me, this pure equanimous flow of who I truly am that is not affected by shame and not affected by redemption, needing neither of these, not my personality. And so I need to recognize that there is this shamer ego and this redeemer ego going on, and they're pulling me to keep me distracted. And just instead of giving into the antics, look away and ignore. Was it Rumi that said, an ignored guest quickly leaves? And that is so true. If we do not focus on what these redeemer and shamer egos are doing, they will not have that pull and push for us that they have now. And if our twins, if we want to call them ego twins, are acting up and fighting with one another, sometimes we just need to put them into a room together, shut the door, let them work it out themselves, and ignore them until they solve the problem themselves. And that's what we have to do with shamer and redeemer ego. Just recognize that we have these two pulls within us when it comes to personality. A pull towards shaming, a pull towards redemption. Know that they come from, all the learned experiences that we stuffed and stored from the voices of several other individuals who've had responsible for some of our conditioning as we grew through the years. And that is just a part of our personality, and we are not our personality. We are not our ego. We are that equanimous flow of joy that is behind the personality. And we just need to fall away from the personality and back into that to be home, and away from the pull and push of shamer or redeemer ego. I'm hoping that answers your question. Thank you so much for being patient with me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Namaste.